Welcome to Show Studio. It's London Fashion Week and we're here to talk about the Burberry show. Burberry, I think, have not just kind of eclipsed London Fashion Week, but kind of all of Fashion Week this season with the announcement that they made between the men's shows and the women's wear shows about how they're kind of restructuring their business. I'm sure most of our viewers are aware, but just to kind of recap, what they're going to be doing is showing their men's and women's together. They're going to be doing one unified collection, which was going to be completely seasonless. They're going to show February and September, and it's not going to be kind of spring, summer, autumn, winter. And I guess the biggest part that's got the most sort of press is it's going to be available to buy immediately, and they'll release a campaign at exactly that same time. And off the back of that, a few other people have made kind of similar changes. Tom Ford, Paul Smith has talked about how he's kind of realigning his collections, and Vetements, which is obviously a very different kind of bag to Burberry, and much smaller label, have talked about how they're sort of realigning in a way that will mean their collections have a lot more time on the shop floor. So it's a super weird fashion week because everyone's kind of attending the shows but knowing that everything's changing, and it's kind of all Burberry's fault, so it felt apt to do a panel about them. I'm conscious how prompt their shows are, so just before we dig into our discussions, I'll just let my wonderful panellists who are going to help me sort of discuss the significance of these changes just introduce themselves, starting with you, Dal.
Hello, I'm Chodha, I'm a fashion writer.
Hello, I'm Nathalie. I teach fashion history and theory at Central St Martin's and London College of Fashion.
I'm Cora Delaney, I'm editorial assistant at large at ASOS.
I'm Caryn, Franklin, I'm a fashion commentator and diversity visionary.
Caryn, I'm going to go to you first because I know you think a lot about the ethics of fashion, which is something that gets forgotten a lot during Fashion Week. Everyone's too busy with other things to think about whether something's, sustainable or fair. What do you make of these changes? Because obviously it's going to have a huge effect on a lot of people, notably young designers, which some people have started to write about. But also I just think in terms of the mindset that it shows that fashion is operating in, it's quite strange. What are your thoughts?
Excited.
Are you?
Absolutely. But if fashion does nothing else, it changes and responds to, our need and responding to what it is to be human and what it is we're doing and why we're using fashion. Mm. And for a long time, the shows have seemed like an antiquated system. I mean, I remember in the 90s when John Maybury tried to take Rifat Ozbek, onto film to kind of say, look, do we need this whole kind of expensive gathering? And increasingly, for me, as you know, because we often talk about it, the fashion normative body, the model, is not the end user.
Yeah. And
so the this perception and this promotion of the fashion normative body, which is now broadcast, digitally across the world, it is becoming disconnected from the customer.
Yeah.
So one could say that Burberry have begun to think about reconnecting with the person who pays for the product and who keeps everybody in jobs. So, long story short, what I'm beginning to think is it's possible that this trade show event, which they're still talking about doing, and having embargoed information, will go back to how it was when I began fashion, that it was trade talking to trade. Mm. And then the consumer show will have more empathy for the consumer. And we know that so many women are, engaged in social comparison with this fashion normative body. Yeah. And it's not helpful for... it's not helpful for feminine well-being, and increasingly it's not helpful for masculine well-being.
Do we all agree with that because these shows are going to be that concept of buy immediately, it's going to mean that fashion shows have to think more about a shopper or a viewer or the public than just the norms or the expectations of the industry? You're not.
Well, I think the comparison with Apple has been made, obviously for obvious reasons, but I think that to launch a collection a fashion collection and to launch it in the same way as Apple launches, the new iPhone, for example. And I think there are real parallels here, but I think launching a new collection is very similar to an iPhone which is immediately available.
Yeah.
And I still think that there's a different system in place. But I think it's great, Caryn, that you're so positive about it. I don't know if I share that optimism, but I think
Why
it's
do you not
really...
share the optimism?
To me, it's still about luxury, and there is a sense of waiting is part of wanting, isn't it? And if we take waiting out of wanting, are we losing that sense that today's luxuries will become tomorrow's necessities? Is everything immediately necessary?
I think the waiting time has shrunk, though. I mean, with the iPhone, it's the waiting time is being in the queue outside the store in the rain overnight.
Okay, that's true.
So there is still a sense of delay, but I mean, if we're going to the model where literally you walk out of the show and there's a pop-up shop outside, and you could literally leave the show with a garment, then I think we have cause to be really worried about how we value craft, creativity, beauty, and all of those sorts of things that we are actually kind of treating in a very disposable manner, and we have been since in the last 3 or 4 years, let's say, with the advent, the way we're all using digital technology, for example. But I think there's still, I'm sort of a little bit on the fence here, which is kind of not a comfortable place because it hurts. I think the most important thing for me is that we're almost kind of dividing fashion fans, followers, shoppers into different pockets now. It's more nuanced. I don't think everyone that's watching the Burberry show is a customer of Burberry. And I think we're now going to see people really start to value the things that maybe some of us got into fashion for in the first place. So I think now there's a renewed kind of, those younger designers, you just have to look at the fashionista presentations, this renewed kind of interest in craft and really textiles and all of that stuff is literally these kind of a younger generation screaming out for all, times that have passed. And I think that's what's quite interesting, is that you're now going to have a really small group of super kind of fans of fashion who absolutely love the delay, the time, and then you're just going to have shoppers. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think the high street should be worrying more than...
I think the high street should
rather
be very,
than independent
very
designers, because fast fashion has traditionally meant, your Zaras and Topshops, but fast fashion now is all fashion.
But I don't know if it's going to have a huge effect on craft, because I think it is the same timeline. It's almost like Burberry are obviously big enough to skip a season, which is basically how they've caught up.
Yes, yeah.
They're still going to spend. It's not like when we say buy immediately, it's like people think that the clothes are going to be made in a day, because like the clothes are still going to be made over the course of 6 months and designed over the course of 6 months. It's just that they're aligning their show. I mean, I don't know what I think about it in some ways. I think it's more than just about who the show is for. I think it's about what is the show and does a show need to happen. I find these shows sometimes they don't make you feel very good, not just because of the body image and what have you, but also because of it just feels wasteful. And I wonder if you're going to see shows which are much more like, public facing events or things that feel more like, an event or a cultural moment, and less just like this kind of incredibly opulent treat for the fashion press, which is what it feels like.
But it is about making trends, it's about creating tastes, and I think that also takes time. Editors, photographers, image makers need to work on, we need to digest those ideas and then change our mind. And maybe Burberry isn't a tastemaker.
No, I didn't.
No.
That was great.
I want to pick your brains, Cora, in a minute, because obviously Cora works a lot with ASOS, and I think that's interesting because obviously it's a very different kind of thing to Burberry, but you work a lot with young women and young men, young fashion fans, and I'm interested. Do you think they care about wait time and things like that? Do they equate that with luxury?
When you wait for something, you want it more. It's like if you do an order and you've got to wait 4 months, it's so exciting. It's like Christmas when it comes. Yeah. But I don't know. It's different with young designers because they haven't got their own store, have they? They can't. They need to know what people are going to buy. Yeah, it almost fits more with a young designer, doesn't it? Because also they don't have a store. I think the problem with Burberry is it felt like out of step, because Burberry's everywhere, but then you couldn't get the stuff you wanted. So it's almost like, I don't mind waiting for Charles Jeffrey because I can't get Charles Jeffrey anywhere. But Burberry, it just felt like what you could get was, do you know what I mean? Like it was so everywhere but nowhere.
It's product. Look, it's a boot, it's a jacket, it's a bag, it's a dress. And all of that stuff you can pretty much, particularly Burberry being the size that it is, will understand its customer incredibly well and will know which markets will want what, in what sizes. So they, in a sense, have this power, and it is a power to be able to get this stuff produced before knowing what people want, and which is the challenge facing smaller brands now, because of course, although they are skipping a season, you know, young designers won't necessarily be able to, they won't have the capital or the time to be able to say, right, I'll make 25 of these skirts, and hopefully a store will pick them up, because someone might order 100, someone might order 10, and that's the bit that I think is
I
more
don't think
concerning.
anyone's quite worked out how the buyer relation aspect of it is going to work, though. I think that is going to be something that will be, I think it's probably going to be much more collaborative than it is now, but it's already actually is quite collaborative. You know, buyers, it's not like they walk in and they're like, we want 4 of that, 10 of that, 100 of that. Like they do have these ongoing conversations with designers now where they're like, we need to see more of this, we need to, like, people always make these kind of, oh no, designers' collections are being controlled by buyers, but it is true that there is much more of a conversation.
I wonder
They
also,
put slow-mo into it, or is it just a bad quality? They're actually, they're slow-moing as they go live. Jesus Christ.
Technology is amazing these days.
I wonder also, Lou, if the pre-tail concept will again sort of fuse here, so that smaller designers are able to use kind of that mechanism to say, right, you've seen it on the catwalk, you know, we can deliver this in X amount of time, given the makeup, the manufacture time, but we're going to reduce waste by saying, should we be making 25 of each? We're actually going to make what you order.
Well, it's weird, it's really interesting what Cora's saying about waiting, because I think you were probably applying that off the back of kind of personal order mentality, which is obviously a luxury that us lot that work in fashion get. Like, I personal order loads of stuff, which is for the sake of our viewers, when you go to the designer and you buy it at the same time as the retailers are buying it and you get it for cost price. But I do sometimes think, why is that not something that designers are offering more people? Because we all get it within the fashion industry, but actually, you know, I'm sure if someone loves a young designer, they would want to operate in that way, but it's like, that is not possible. There's no direct interaction between shopper and designer in terms of, I like this, can I buy it? Yes, you'll get it in. So they have to wait. It's all filtered through a retailer. It's really weird.
Well, with all the e-commerce platforms that they're all setting up, you know, there are lots, like Matthew Miller, for example, on his men's and his women's wear, is very reactive to what his customers, you know, he's having conversations with them online, and if they say this was sold out in a small, I saw the other day that you tweeted someone saying, hey, there's now a small at this link, and you know, so it is that good, very I think you just have to have good customer service, which is the thing that is such a boring thing to say, but I mean, it's not something that I hope fashion colleges start teaching, because we shouldn't have to do that. But generally, you know, it is about understanding that relationship that you have with a customer and end user, and I think we don't probably talk about that enough because it's not sexy. It's like we haven't talked about business for decades within fashion education because it's not sexy. We're now starting to wake up to the fact.
We do.
Do you? Yeah. But I think there's been lots of places that don't and haven't. And I've interviewed designers before and asked them this question. They said, God, if they'd asked that, if I'd had to study that at St Martin's on my MA, it would have switched off. That's not what I went there for. So I think there is this new kind of thirst for knowledge in different ways. In different parts of the industry that will go on to inform how they release their collections.
I mean, one of the things that we teach and talk to the students about is to understand the difference between a Fordist model and a post-Fordist model. So post-Fordism within a postmodern context means complete market segmentation, and we cater to the individual. And Eva, you know what you're talking about, Lou, if you want an orange t-shirt, you know, this week and a brown one the next, then we can do that for you. But to me, Burberry has always been, I guess, almost concentrating on the core aspect of the brand and the collection, and really focusing on the products that sell the most, like the scarves, you know, which have a high markup and are, you know, £100 million part of the business. You know, I read recently in a business report on Burberry, and to really focus on these core products meant that they've actually simplified production and probably laid sort of the foundation for this kind of model to be possible.
But I think it's good to do that in a way, because what I find really tiresome, and it's happened a lot this fashion week, where you talk about ready to wear, and then people are like, oh well, you know, it never sells. It is about the clothes and the shoes and the bags anyway. And I kind of think, you know, it's bad that we've just kind of accepted that. It's like the unsaid thing in fashion, that no one actually buys any of the clothes and it's all fueled by perfume or accessories. Because I don't think that's because there isn't a set of people who want to buy expensive clothes. It's because ready-to-wear just doesn't operate in a way that speaks to a consumer or seems relevant, whereas bags and shoes, I think, do more, and I hope what will happen with this system is it will mean that clothes seem actually relevant and actually have a life.
But I think the market for these luxury clothes, the luxury in inverted commas, has always been small.
Yeah.
And the weird thing, and as Caryn was saying at the beginning, that this big kind of scale that fashion is on now is slightly jarring with the realities of fashion at a certain point still being relatively elitist.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel good to say that, and it doesn't feel good to kind of admit that, but it still is. I mean, that jacket, I mean, I wouldn't like to guess how much that is, but it's not for everyone tuning in.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of it's really screwed up that we're all watching this thinking, oh well, who's going to buy that? Actually, still let's say the 5% of the world that would have bought it anyway. Really, I don't know whether this is encouraging more people to buy it, but more people are wanting it, and I think that's where these changes are happening because of that kind of desire. We're all just looking at this sweet shop, and we've all got a sweet tooth. Whereas I think that's what I find quite dangerous. It's almost quite irresponsible. Fashion, and fashion in recent times, I've always said this has been kind of, as it's exposed to more people, we're now judging it with the same moral code that we would do other industries. And fashion has always been, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, kind of we've always had our own moral code.
Yeah.
Whether that's right or wrong, it's not for me to say. But now it's being kind of looked up there next to the food industry, travel, everything.
Cinema,
and quite rightly so. And I think, but fashion is still what it is. It's elitist by definition. And either because of your body type, your skin tone, how much you're in your bank balance, your lifestyle, all of that stuff is, we are segregated. And I think to watch this and think that this catwalk to retail model is so brilliant and democratic, I think is just brilliantly laughable.
I don't think it's democratic, I just think it's relevant.
I think lots of people are kind of unpacking it in that way. It's so democratic with luxury fashion. It's not democratic at all.
Yeah.
But I wonder whether... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I wonder whether, because it's about making adjustments all the time and interpreting demand, because at the end of the day, it's just about sales.
Yeah.
That there will be the intelligence feedback that says, as you have just rightly flagged up, fashion, it's very much about promoting great look, great coat, great this, great that, whilst the people who are promoting it are getting it at reduced prices because they cannot afford the price. And that consumer intelligence feedback goes into the system where, these are the lovely, beautiful fantasy items that we are enjoying and that will go in the magazines, but these are the things that we're ordering because this is what we can afford.
Yeah.
And so straight away, the brand then works with prices that are going to, deliver efficacy across the board, whilst still giving everybody the dream, the beauty, the vision. But I think it's really fair play to say that, the fashion promotion is based on all the people within it already getting discount, but forgetting that outsiders don't.
Yeah. And freebies and what have you. It's like, it's very strange, that kind of setup, though.
Yes, it is strange.
It's really like...
Yes.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Cora? You were going to say something?
With the shoes and the bags, I think people like to invest in bags and shoes more than clothes.
Yeah.
You think if you buy a bag, you'll probably still be using it maybe in 5 years, but if you buy a coat, you'll probably get bored of it in about 3 months.
Is that how you shop?
Probably.
In
But I
theory.
mean, I'd rather spend loads of money on like a bag.
But do you not think that that's another mentality change that can happen, where we make clothes seem like they're going to last? Because shoes actually don't last that long. They wear out really quickly. So it is really bizarre that we have that mentality that, like, I have it as well. You're like, I'd rather spend money on bags or shoes. I spend all my money on shoes. But then they wear out quicker than like a great coat or a really nice shirt. So I think that's...
But I guess what we mean is how long will it last? I think traditionally when we say last, we think, it's the reason why black handbags rarely go on sale in luxury brand houses, because people pay full price for them all the time.
Yeah.
But I think maybe your definition, or our, I should say, of lasting is years.
Yeah.
And now I think maybe it means seasons, like 6 months or something. Maybe it lasts 6 months. Maybe that's enough.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just kind of, speculating. But I don't know.
I just think you get bored of like clothes more than you get bored of a nice bag.
A nice bag. But then it's weird because I feel like accessories designers are going much more in the direction of clothes, where it's much more seasonal. Like if you look at Sophia Webster or even Anya Heinreich and what she's doing, it's very much like it's much more throwaway. Like long gone are the days of like a nice black handbag. It's like, you know, crazy, like everything on it. Like it's very like you have that for a season and then you get eggs and stuff. Like very strange. But that's quite interesting because it's like I don't understand in a way, because I think, you know, the accessories and businesses, they've got it good, you know, that people perceive it in exactly the way Cora just said. So it's like, why are they trying to go in a kind of throwaway? I guess it's because it'll sell more.
But I mean, I guess looking at Mulberry and the latest kind of creative direction of the show, you know, all of those clothes that to me just look kind of like everything else and had no point of view. But I think in order to sell a handbag for £1,200, you kind of need to see it set off against a kind of beautiful napa leather jacket or something like that.
Story.
You need the story. And I think what Mulberry have just done is write a story. Burberry are writing a story.
But then I don't know if you do, because look at this slow-mo is freaking me out. Oh my god. But look at some of the most successful accessories brands of recent years. They've had no clothes. Like Nicholas Kirkwood for shoes, Monsieur Gavriel for the bags. There was no story to that, it was just a great product. So I don't know if it is necessarily the case that to be seduced by an accessory you need... I think part of the reason Monsieur Gavriel, I always pronounce it wrong, did so well is because people, like, it just felt really authentic. It didn't feel like there was any story, it just felt like it was really good stuff. So actually that almost felt refreshing when you have all of this, like... Yeah,
you're right. But I think there's probably more people that... There aren't... How many people do buy handbags from brands that are kind of just... Like Monsieur Gavriel is relatively niche, even though it's quite well known. It's still quite a niche brand. But I think on this level, when we're talking kind of mass, I think people still want to see
they want to feel like they're buying into high fashion.
The story.
So they need the fashion. We didn't talk at all about the clothes.
Is it finished?
Which is very... Yeah, it's finished. They're going to come out in a bit.
Who's singing?
I think it's Jake Bugg, isn't it? I'm kind of embarrassed that I know that, but I think it is. Is it? Okay, Brett, good. I'm going to shame you there for knowing.
So there's that link with Burberry and Apple Music, of course.
Yeah.
And he will be part of...
He's performed with them before, though. Their crew.
I really like the staging.
They changed that. The first time they changed the setup was for the men's show that we just saw, and it was completely different. You know, because they used to have this kind of runway down the middle of the carpet, and this feels much more intimate. When you're in the space, it's kind of like these smaller benches. You don't have that tiered seating anymore. And the models kind of wind through, so it does feel a lot more intimate.
I like the casting.
Yeah, the casting is really, really good. But do you not think it feels so young? It's like they're trying to do this kind of subculture punky thing, which just doesn't seem to fit.
It's young and white.
No, I actually
there
just
is
me.
No, there is.
If I missed
Girls of Colour.
Yeah, there is.
You blinked twice.
I mean, not enough, but a lot more than there've been at other. The slow-mo again, the dreaded slow-mo.
It's Instagram, isn't it?
It's like that weird
Everyone's
setting on the iPhone where it goes slow and then suddenly it's really fast.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Everyone's doing that all of a sudden, the sort of step back.
Yeah, the step back.
Many
the
pictures
boomerang,
from shows.
Boomerang. Yeah,
it's really
people are
irritating.
obsessed with that.
It's you're right. So age is interesting, isn't it, with the casting?
But I think that's kind of across the board, isn't it? These bigger...
But I feel like Burberry, it's not just in the casting, it's in the styling. They're doing such a like young, you know, it's like young London kind of... that kind of, you know, undone, like slightly messy thing that they're doing, and it's so like McQueen is on young girls, but it doesn't look like clothes for young people, whereas this looks like how kids dress, some of it, you know, like little sparkly dresses, and like for the men it's a lot of those zip up tops, like tracky tops and stuff. I wonder if that is just about trying to get a new, I guess maybe it's the Saint Laurent effect as well, which has proved like if you're packaging up youth culture and selling it as a lifestyle does very well, maybe it's part of that.
But this doesn't seem authentic to me in that sense, because by putting it on young people, it's not for a young customer, and so to me that is sort of a confusing message, or slightly contradictory.
But do we think this shift is for young customer?
I don't know, Cora, what do you think?
I don't think anyone young is going to be able to buy some Burberry.
But this catwalk to retail straight away. Do you think that's for kind of you know?
Well, so could we literally go to Burberry now and buy these clothes?
Yeah.
So this has become a commercial.
Something that's expensive, you need time to like have a think. Well, most people need to have a think about what they're going to buy. You're not just going to run to the shop and pick it up.
Yeah.
No, let's go and buy it now, look.
But I think that...
Get Nick's card out.
Let's say it's all part of a test, research for the panel. But I think what you're right about is, I don't think it's like you have to buy it immediately. We're talking about like buy now as if, you know, you can only buy it the day of the show, whereas it is like going to be in stores for, you know, months after. But I think it's more just so all the buzz gets the product that's in the store.
I mean,
so you don't
But
think-
it's about counting
Absolutely.
cash fast, isn't it? I mean, I'm sorry. It's like you instantly want the money. You have it, you buy it, you count it.
I don't think
what
it's
it-
that. I think it's about making. I think it's just really commercial. It's the fact that it got really awkward for brands to be showing like their new show, their new season, while they were still trying to sell their old stuff. It was like it's such a confusing message. It was like, here's our new idea. This is the future. This is what we've done. This is like how fashion should be, but buy what we just made last
But
season.
this is great
Like, that
because
was
if you
the
just
problem.
watch that and then now you walk past the store and that campaign's in the window and that coat's in the window, it totally makes sense. So I think in that way, this is brilliant. This is clever, but I'm obviously saying that with a degree of caution because of course Burberry have their own stores. They're retailers.
Yeah.
They're not just they're not wholesaling
Absolutely.
their collection, which is something that probably let's say 50%. Whatever, but lots of the younger brands or smaller. When I'm saying young, I don't even mean those ones at Fashionista. I mean brands that maybe we might think are
Like Urgent or
huge.
something
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that, yeah.
They people that don't have hundreds of stores all across the world. I just wonder where they're going to fit into all of this.
Yeah.
But from Burberry's perspective, I think this makes so much sense because if you walked home or you just watched that show on your phone on the bus and you looked out the window and you
I would
just
be getting the
looked
bus if I was
there
going to
you
buy
go.
Burberry.
in your taxi or your horse and cart, you immediately kind of think, well, there's that jacket. I'm going to
But
go
do you
try
not
it
think
on.
that's slightly how people shop with ASOS? It's like they have an idea of something they want, whether they see it on a celebrity or even they see it on someone else on the street, and they go on their phone and they try and find it. But that's what's strange because ASOS is so much cheaper, so it's a bit weird.
That's why I think you can easily think, I want this jacket, it's 50 quid, I'll buy it now. That's fair. But I think with this, it's like, it is luxury. So I don't think anyone would want to be like running straight into buying something that quick. They're like,
I think there is something though in looking at how fashion has developed, and in the old days, the consumer did not see the product for a good 3 or 4 months until after the show. So there was no digital platform for people to upload all the images they'd taken at the show. There was very little hard copy devoted to catwalk imagery.
Yeah.
I mean, when I began, I was at ID, and we were one of the few people doing that. I mean, Face didn't do it. They were a music magazine for a while. So, and certainly all the mainstream magazines didn't do it. So there was no broadcast of what was on the catwalk until much nearer the time it was in the shops, aligned with consumer desire. And it's got so out of step that if I were a big business, I would be saying, why are we getting everybody so excited? Because we know everybody is going to go on social networking and see the gear. And, human nature being what it is, you can't hold that passion and that interest for 6 months. So, I mean, it makes total sense that they would be trying to align the broadcast of the product, the marketing, the advertising. This is a massive advertising spend.
That was an ad campaign we just watched.
And that's what we've been saying for a long time anyway.
That's
That's
what I
what
think. I don't
shows
think it's
are.
any more commercial or any more kind of cash hungry than anything that was happening already. I just think it just wasn't working how it was happening
more savvy.
already. Yeah, so this is smarter. I don't think it's...
Yeah.
And if anything, I do think in a way this is, if you dial it right back to what you were saying at the start and thinking about the shopper, this doesn't suit us, the fashion critic or the fashion press, because, in a way it does render people slightly irrelevant. Though part of me doesn't know if I agree with that. Part of me does think that actually it just means that fashion press do what they should be doing, which is try and inform the public about whether something is interesting.
Well, that's a
they
bigger
should buy
debate, isn't it? What should we be doing?
Yeah. But I think, even I don't see why a review becomes redundant just because it's in the stores. Because what's really funny is a lot of people saying that, they're like, oh, this has mean fashion criticism is irrelevant. But then I thought that just shows that fashion critics think that the only people they're writing for is the industry. Because actually, if the clothes are available while you're writing your review, surely that's better, because it means your review actually has an audience who care about what you're saying. The audience is the people who buy the clothes.
For sure.
You're
It's
not
really
just
weird,
writing
like-
it for your advertisers.
Yeah, whereas people are like, our role's over. And I'm like, well, no, your role is just
Yeah.
actually like you need to think about the reader of your paper or your magazine or your website as someone who wants to read your opinion because it will affect their purchase. And I don't mean down to like, these boots were cool, go buy them. I mean down to like, this is a brand that you should be excited about. Like, this is someone who you should kind of, support with your money. Like, this brand is too derivative. Don't maybe go
so
there.
So many fashion magazines are just echo chambers. We are just talking to the same people. We're talking to our friends. We're talking to people we hate, but we want their jobs. It's this ludicrous situation. But now, yes, you're absolutely right. The exposure of one's thoughts is, there's a brighter spotlight on it. And I guess what I'm really fascinated in is, do people actually care what so and so has said before they go and purchase that kind of knitted jacket? I don't know.
I'm not sure if Burberry really cares about it that much, because I think one of Aren's biggest legacies was that she took advertising in-house completely, and that was after 2006, and she has, the media team, the music team, the advertising team is completely controlled by the brand, and that's of course a sign of strength and confidence. And by doing this now, it's just really the next logical step, isn't it? By taking any influence that could come from outside that might have an impact on how the brand is perceived or controlled, back into their own realm, and Burberry is more than just another brand. It's a culture, isn't it?
And also, they don't operate like other big brands. Like, they don't ban people from their shows. They don't get nasty emails if they don't like the reviews. And I think it's because I think their PR team has better things to do and operate differently. But I think it's also because they don't care, because they don't need to. Like, it doesn't.
They don't need to. Yeah.
But then it does worry me that I think part of the problem is that for a long time fashion criticism has been this idea that things that were commercial were somehow less interesting, and I think critics have kind of almost written their own sort of death warrant, or whatever the term is, like over the last
harsh.
But I mean, like over the last few, like over the last few kind of years, or maybe the last decade or so, this idea of I don't tell people what to buy, what I'm writing isn't affecting how people shop. Like, long gone are the days where we were doing that. People have kind of, I think the role of a critic has become so confused, when actually I think the role of a critic is more important than ever, especially if we are doing bias now. It's such an exciting new time for critics to operate in a way that isn't just about pleasing the industry and pleasing PRs, as we were saying, but it's like, I think our idea of what reviews are has changed so much, partly because of the way the critics themselves have defined themselves. I'm not talking about everyone, there's some brilliant writers. I think someone like Vanessa Friedman or a Jo Ellison who have actually very much speak to a woman or speak to a shopper, like Charlie Porter's the same, it's always... But I think a lot of this kind of obsessive kind of criticism, all about like references, and it's very industry focused, and there is a place for that. Like, I love reading someone like a Tim, where you get all these amazing cultural references, but I think that kind of criticism is changing and needs to feel more in step with this kind of a business model, because this is about the customer, and that's what keeps fashion going. It's a strange one.
I think also, I mean, a point that you made, people do, I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced it. You go to a place where it's a non-fashion crowd, and people immediately say, so tell me what I should be wearing then. And they will hold on to those personal references where, I will say, well, I really like this, and I'm really interested in this because they care about this, and they do this because, and their promotion of the way that they work includes as much sort of sustainability as they can, and I know this person and I think they're authentic, they have integrity. Those things matter, not just this is a brand new trend and that's the exactly only thing, and that's why I think our that having a bigger picture and caring about a bigger picture and caring about the reality of what it is the consumer wants to know, not just the cool factor, which I think a lot of fashion writing got kind of
swept up in. That's exactly what I mean when I say it is a really exciting time for criticism, for those who want it to be, who want to embrace the change, because actually for the first time again critics can actually influence what people buy and wear, whereas that was only happening back in the times where they would write about it and they would be the first people to tell viewers and shoppers and readers what the collections were, because that imagery wasn't available. And it's like we're almost going back to that time now, and I do think how exciting, but it's strange because I've had that before where people say to me, "Oh, you work in fashion, what should I wear?" And my default response, which I think most fashion journalists do, is they're like, "Oh, that's not really what it's about." And then you're like, "No, that's exactly what it's about." It's really weird that that's what you always say. It's as if there's like, you're serving some higher purpose that's not involved, that doesn't relate to like how people shop, when actually that's exactly what we should be doing.
That's exactly what it's about. And we'll also put pictures of your favourite celebrities or people you really like, and we'll tell you that they've done it wrong. And we'll have this whole jury, you know, on they didn't match the bag properly or they haven't got their references right. I mean, that is the thing that traumatises a lot of ordinary non-fashion viewers, where they think somehow that there's a judgment about the way that they look. I mean, it's quite a sort of an aesthetic bullying in a way.
Yeah.
You know, that,
those articles are horrible. You can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the dark end of celebrity culture, isn't it? It's like,
or anybody. They don't even have to be, you know, kind of celebrity, but, you know, often there is this, we'll decide if she's done it right or not.
Yeah.
And most ordinary consumers find that really distressing, because if that judgment is on a celebrity who's got a stylist, who's got the money, then what does that say about them? And I'm sure we've also been to those same parties where people will also go, "Oh God, I just put this with, you must think I'm really, you know, and I love these shoes, they're so comfortable, I know they're not trendy." You know, that is the level of anxiety that's out there. You know, and for us to be able to address that as commentators, writers, you know, to actually have more empathy about the end user could be a really good thing.
But I think, it's interesting. I was writing about this when I wrote my sibling review, and I just think that notion of buying something because it makes you happy, or you do think in a kind of positive way, not in a kind of anxious way, that it would improve your life, or you would be a happier, kind of more confident person because of it. All those positive feelings. I just think that's so removed from how we shop. I think everyone shops through. It's become the norm to shop through insecurity. You know, buy this because you'll feel better. Buy this because you're fat, or you're wrinkled, or you're not on trend, or this will make you thinner. Like, that's what drives. That's how.
That's what fashion
thrives
it's
on. Weird, isn't it?
Yes, always has. Yeah.
But then I think, you know, technology doesn't sell itself in that way. It's not like you're going to be crap at work if you don't buy this iPhone. It's like, this will make you.
But obsolescence is a big part of technology, isn't it? So something is outdated, and you can only, you know, you can't even download the update if you don't have the new product.
But
so
I
how
think
on earth are you going to exist?
But I don't think it ever gets into like your personality. It's like, you know, it's very much like enjoy moments. Like the technology advertising does feel more positive about people. You are like, when I watch an advert, I'm like, actually that probably would make my life easier. I'm not like, oh God, I'm a failure, like I need an iPhone. Whereas fashion, it sells itself on like, I'm ugly, I'm outdated, you know, and I think that's what in a way has made fast fashion go even faster, because we see more and more of that now because of magazines and the internet.
I just think there are so many mixed messages. There always have been, but it's been easier to ignore the people that you feel like don't say what you feel. Whereas now that's really difficult because everyone's lobbing views at you. So someone tells you should love your stretch marks and take a picture of them and hashtag them for a certain charity on Instagram. Someone else tells you to go and get surgery. Someone else tells you to do this. So I would be, if I was, 10. I was with my nieces this weekend, and they had a hideous Frozen themed birthday party. But seeing all 24 of them running around in this merch, this stuff that they'd all raided the whole of Birmingham clean of Frozen merchandise, and just seeing the way that the woman who was playing Anna talking to them, and she was just saying all of this stuff about, all the girls can do this and all the boys can do this and the boys don't do ballet, and I was just standing there like, this is the curse of someone like us, people like us who maybe spend a bit longer thinking about stuff, because you go back into, and let's be honest, the real world, and there I was in this massive room kind of worrying about the gender normative stereotypes of this woman who was in an Anna dress popping up for fag breaks, and that's the ludicrous situation that those of us that work in fashion
but I don't think
find
it's
themselves
ludicrous.
in.
I think things like pondering, societal made gender expectations is important.
All expectations, yeah, I didn't mean to
But
kind of put it
that is
onto that,
important.
but I think that's kind of largely, there are so many, I think they're so confusing now that people don't, I think what I find really fascinating is that most of us have been privileged enough to learn how to use the internet, whereas there's a generation right now who have not necessarily been taught to use the internet, they just have it. And there's a problem there, because with any sort of knowledge, we all know where knowledge is, but you've got to be told where to almost go and get it from, because you can get it from lots of different places, whereas actually we've not really been, or a generation hasn't been schooled. And similarly with fashion information, we haven't actually sat down and told people in an intelligent way that, you know what, someone is going to say the opposite to this. Just because this magazine tells you your leg should be this thin, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be. And I think the role of the parent, and it's all really confusing now, we're all meant to be doing each other's jobs. We're all meant to be sending out positive role model messages for each other, when actually the people that should be sending out those messages are the people that are in your physical real life, the people you're at school with, the parents, you know, all together. Obviously we do have a job to do it together, but I feel like there's this kind of disconnect now, so that's why fashion is quite, you know, we are looking at fashion in a different way.
I would say that fashion has assumed enormous power in people's lives. You know, it occupies a taste leadership position in a way that many other industries don't, and a lot of people defer to it. Really intelligent women defer to fashion, and those women possibly are bringing up the daughters who should be getting a feminist steer, but they're not, because, you know, Tansy Hodgkins says fashion is capitalism's favourite love child. The only way it can generate these amplified sales is through prodding at insecurities, because we wouldn't buy all of it if we were feeling people love me as I am. I mean, most of kind of Western world product would take a dive if actually everybody had deservedly high self-esteem.
But then it's that weird line, isn't it, between, I agree with you, like you wouldn't buy all this stuff if you had that sense of people love me as I am, but then there's also, fashion has also become very wrapped, and you must know this from your ID days, very wrapped in this idea of express yourself. So it's kind of this positive thing of like, do go out thrifting, buy stuff, like, you know, buy love these amazing things, buy them, you know, and you're expressing yourself and being creative. So it's also, it's kind of, it carves up these very strange and diverse justifications of why you should spend, and some of them are wrapped
but
up
I think
in
should is a key word. I think when you want to make a statement about yourself and you're operating in a way that is in celebration of being the best you can be, and knowing that you're creating a visual narrative that you want other people to read. Plenty of people will miss it, but, you know, we're in fashion partly because we love those codes and those narratives. Then it's because you want to, but not because you feel you should. Whereas I feel a lot of mainstream fashion promotion is aiming at the should.
I'm interested in this though, because I don't know if it's just mainstream, and it's interesting to get your perspective on this, Cora, because I feel for young people, actually, it comes less from magazines now and it comes more from things like Instagram. Like, I think young people's sense of like whether their body is acceptable and all of the stuff that we accuse magazines of doing, like body shaming, blah, 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 I think that's more social media now. What do you think? Because young people spend so much time on things like Instagram.
But I think on Instagram there's like so many accounts that are like pro do what you want. Like everyone's like, you're allowed to, you know, like Arvida and people like that, they're like trying to like celebrate everyone being individual. So I think it's like a good thing.
Actually, that's interesting, because I guess it's like one platform.
But isn't it so sad when we think we're all individuals? I always find that so depressing.
What do you mean?
I don't want to be an amazing individual.
What you're right.
No, I don't. I just don't think that's something I would aim for.
Well, that's another pressure, isn't it?
Because if we try that, we all end up looking the same. I'm sorry. It's not possible. It just doesn't work.
But do you think it's quite a capitalist idea to be a fabulous individual?
Yes, of course. And it sells us that dream, and in the end, we very quickly all look like as if we were buying Burberry. But I don't I think, I mean, what I do when, I talk to the students that, about that a lot, fashion and identity and how that is linked. And one of the big ideas is that, to remind ourselves that we belong to groups, that we are all women, or we are all men, or we are something, between those lines. But there are certain things that we need to identify, and that there needs to be a sense of belonging to something. Otherwise, we're all atomized, and that's really a very depressing prospect. And fashion and the language of fashion that you're talking about, Caryn, is an amazing part of showing that we feel similar to other people, that we identify with other people, and that we belong to something.
I wonder if Burberry had these chats in the
So I don't see this idea that Instagram sells us this notion of that we can all be amazing individuals and different from everybody else. I think
I don't think that's more like.
I meant
no, but I'm
you
not
can be a
disagreeing
bit fat
with
if
you
you
in
want,
that sense,
like,
but
and you can wear whatever you want. Like,
Yeah.
don't think that because you're not a model or something you can't wear that.
Yeah, because as much as you're right, there's a lot of like it girls and influencers models on Instagram that for all of those that exist, there's also a huge amount of women showing something very different, which is not the case if you go and buy a women's magazine. You don't get that mix of content, you get that one direct message. Are you with your work in body image, are you trying to look at the ways that some of these kind of very commercial and polished accounts on Instagram are speaking to people? Because that is like, they're editorial beasts in their own right now, some of those.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a sort of massive area, really.
Yeah.
I mean, psychology in fashion is such a brand new area. I mean, it's only last year that London College of Fashion created the course run by Dr. Caryn Mayer. So we have very little dedicated study of from fashion insiders who know what the narratives and what to look at. There's very little in place. There's obviously a lot from outsiders looking in at fashion, and there's a huge amount on body image and the effect of fashion and mainstream mass market imagery on people's ideas of themselves. I'm very excited to think that would be a dialogue that would progress, because at the end of the day we're talking about identity. There are psychological concepts called idealized selves and possible selves that are all to do with sort of building your own self-construct, understanding who you are by what it is you are promoting, and obviously we know we do that internally, we know we do that psychologically, we know we have inner conversations with us, and our inner landscape often reflects our kind of outer projection. For me, I think that's why I was attracted to fashion in the very first place, and that's why I went straight to ID, because it was not about hemlines, it was about personal identity. And that's what keeps me coming back to kind of ask questions and to look into what fashion is saying. And a shift like this, where fashion begins to care about the end user, I can't help but get excited about it. And if the end user ends up having more power, I mean, I don't know how long I've been wanting to find out I want more information in my garments about where it's been made and who's made it, and it's only the sustainable dialogue that's pushing for that. I went into, I do it often, go into high street shops and say, so where is this made and who makes it and what do you know about it? And most shop assistants will go, I don't know, you'll have to ask the manager. And the manager will be called, and it will take a good 5 minutes, and the manager will go, I don't know, I'll have to get back to head office. Why don't mainstream companies care about this? And this is what the consumer's been asking for a long time. So anything for me that gives the individual, in a way, more power, instead of this kind of mass, huge brand has all the power is a good thing. I like this, this power balance shifting.
But do you think that is what will happen with this ASOS, with this Burberry? It's because I've got you here. I'm getting distracted by the blue. Do you think that's what will happen with this Burberry setup? Do you think it actually will give consumers more power?
I don't know.
I think it will give Burberry more power. I'm not sure if it will give the consumer more power.
Yeah, I don't know, but I do think being able to align consumer desire and for there to be consumer feedback has got to be a good start. I mean, one of the things I think is exciting that this lends itself to is engaging with body mapping and artificial intelligence to help brands understand what shape their consumer actually is. Their demographic around skin tone, for instance. If they're doing makeup product and they're promoting it, they want to make sure they've got the correct product matched to the correct skin tones. In the same way that, if you're in business, ultimately you're doing what you're doing to generate turnover. It makes sense that they would begin to care about the shape of their consumer in order to sell as much product as possible.
I think what's also really interesting is that all of these changes have brought out a new kind of conversation that maybe we have been privy to it for a while, but maybe kind of the consumer hasn't really thought about this. They've just been annoyed at the delay and not really been able to kind of know why that delay exists. And I think we obviously know why, but it's interesting. I hope that there's going to be a return to actually just people understanding why things take 6 months from some brands. Because as much as we can talk about Burberry, I am really conscious of those younger brands, because I think that's really important that whatever changes are made here at the top, let's say, will obviously have a trickle-down effect. And I think it will probably encourage a huge group of people who all of a sudden thought, that's why I have to wait so long for a Faustine Steinmetz dress or whatever. Because, the fabric's been developed, it came from Italy, then it was made here, And again, as Caryn's saying, knowing where things are made, that knowledge, I think, will now just have to be exposed.
I just think you'll have a big split. You'll have the mega brands who become more in line with almost like the high street, and they operate on those timelines, and it will be because they have stores that litter the high street and they have big e-retail operations. And then you will get the younger designers who feel much more like young businesses and young creatives, and they operate in a really different way. You wait for their clothes, you order them, and I think that's really exciting because that's one of the biggest problems with Fashion Week, is how bizarre it is that we stick, like a really young designer next to a Burberry or a Prada, and we analyse them in exactly the same way, as if they should be able to produce the same kind of work and the same, we expect them to show in the same way, on the, like, a lot of looks on models on a runway, and it's really, really weird that we've
It'd be great if Fashion Week was just these huge brands, and then all those other designers, as you say, really take the ownership to show their collections when they want to, how they want to.
In different
so there's this constant stream of just exciting things, whether it's an Instagram show by Wes Gordon or it's kind of small presentation by 1205, whatever. But actually, because also, the show has become so kind of generic.
I don't think Fashion Week,
and loads of designers loads of their clothes don't necessarily work in that same space. So I think it'd be really amazing for all of a sudden for them to start saying, well, you know what, I'm going to show my collection in March, and I'm going to sell it directly.
Or do interesting things, like some of the best things at the moment are when like designers, collaborate on like costumes for a ballet, or they do like, costumes for a film, or they make a fashion film, or they do a cool collaboration. Like, that's so much more interesting than just seeing them kind of struggle to put together a show and sit there. It's like, that's what I hope will change, is much more sense of freedom of how you can and should present. That will be the biggest benefit that comes
and going
out
back
of
to
this.
trunk shows which are shows for customers. So you do the private order evening that you were mentioning earlier, where we might order for direct from a designer. You do that, but maybe on a bigger scale. You take a pop-up shop, here's my new collection, I'm here for a month. It's that sort of conversation that I think younger brands need to be having more, rather than looking up to these labels. Because I think if you look up to Burberry, and I've said this before on another point, if you look up to those brands, you will fail, because it's a completely different beast. And I think kind of just nurturing your own business model, I think, is
just
really
being
exciting.
Conscious, being like, I can do things in a different way, like, which definitely can. And I think one thing that I've been said about is I feel like over the last 5 years, maybe 10 years, the designers who've struggled or shut their labels, so whether that's Medium Kirchhoff or even someone like Rich Nicol or Jonathan Saunders, it's been because it's felt like they've been pushed into a system that never suited them. So it's almost like the whole industry that should have been supporting them have been the ones that broke them. It wasn't because there wasn't a interest in their clothes, or there wouldn't have been shoppers that wanted them. Like, you can see how many young people are obsessed with medium cut job. Even today, they talk about it all the time. If you go on Tumblr, you know, people are obsessed. But it was the very thing that should have been kind of supporting them and making their businesses work that kind of crushed them. It's really, really, really strange. And I always think with medium, if they'd opted out from the start, but then it's this thing of fashion giving you buzz and platform and press, so it's kind of like you have to opt in.
You know, a lot of those schemes are, for me, just like Pop Idol, X Factor, whatever. You just get someone has picked 3 designers that they think are cool for whatever reason, and then they are thrown onto this treadmill, and then it's like fight for your life, you know. It's kind of, you know, they shoot horses, don't they? And they're all galloping around dying. And I think some of them die off, some of them don't, and I think that's that misconception that the lots of these things that are put forward to support young designers. You're absolutely right. I think in most cases they push them when they're not ready. Yeah. And I get quite worried about some of like the designer who Marc Jacobs intern that everyone's buzzing about. Yeah. I just hope that someone's giving her the right business advice. Yeah. Because she's got all the press, she's got everything in, but actually
fashionistas are really good at like business, helping people. They give like so much advice to like their young designers. So I think.
And that's crucial, because I think it's not just the show and the press.
I think the problem is what happens after Fashionista, because I agree with you, Fashionista is brilliant at like mentoring, setting people up with people, but like Lulu Kennedy is one woman, and it's like once those kids that's quite rude, once those designers get out of Fashionista, there's not that much support around. And I know Lulu is really good at like staying in touch with people and stuff, but it is only 3 seasons there, and then it's like you are on your own, and that's why it is like churning them out, because it's like they're gone and then they're trying to do it. And I wish there was many other bodies that
I think all of these luxury brands should have mentorship programs. Every single one of them.
That's a nice idea.
Should have at least.
Well, that is what's good about the LVMH prize. Is the most profitable bit of that is you get a year-long mentoring. Yeah. Like that is actually better than any prize money or anything like that. But yeah, there's not very much stuff. There's not enough mentoring, I don't think. And yeah, it is a strange one. It's a strange time, isn't it? It's good that we're having these kind of conversations though, because we've had these conversations on the panels a lot, and it felt like it was kind of just, sometimes it felt like it was us having a rant, and now it's nice that you're seeing stuff change. Like, I'm excited to see how everything develops and grows. It feels like fashion needed a bit of a
I'm interested how it will affect luxury and what we perceive as luxury. And you know, as we said earlier, you know, Burberry is, I think, 8th in luxury ranking worldwide of all the big luxury brands. It's obviously below Cartier and Louis Vuitton, but above Prada still. And I don't think that luxury is just a combination of price and image. I think it is still about production and how it is made. And I think that's what I thought was so interesting about what you were saying, Caryn, earlier. And if it makes us think about, you know, that some luxury brands can just make fast and at a particular quality for a certain price, and others can't, and maybe those young designers that we're talking about, they're something else. They're maybe directional, but they're not luxury, and maybe we have to make a split between
I just
those
think
two.
that thing of luxury, it just doesn't exist as a concept. I think if you speak to, like, everyone just has such different ideas. Like I speak to kind of, you know, sometimes it will be like students or graduates, and their idea is something much more to do with vague concepts such as sort of like authenticity or something being cool, you know.
Yes, I know, but I think there's still luxury brands. I think they're still out there, and there's a lot of debate of what that means, and the ideas about what it actually consists of are changing. And J.W. Anderson is always the one designer that we quote when we say, you know, he rejects that idea of luxury. But I think that doesn't necessarily apply to Burberry. That it's still a different kind of beast and very powerful as such. And I think it's really exciting to see that there are new designers coming through who define themselves by different rules.
Things. What were you gonna say?
I write a piece once a week called Girl Talk, and it's just interviewing like cool, interesting girls. And one of my questions always every week is, what is luxury? And the
what
answers,
do they all say?
They're like so different. Like some people will be like, oh, fur and stripper heels, or someone will be like, oh, having time, or like just literally the most different answers ever.
Yeah,
So I think,
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I like the question.
It's interesting having time, because I think that's another big thing. That's kind of, Marcus and Maida talked about this a lot when they started out, which is they kind of saw their stuff as luxury because of usage. This idea that, you know, it didn't just sit in your wardrobe in plastic. It was luxurious in a way because it was relevant to your life and you could wear it all the time and it made you feel really great. And that was, you know, that's very different to the kind of Vuitton model of luxury. But it's perhaps more beneficial and it's perhaps more fulfilling. So is that luxurious? You know, that's what's interesting. I just think people have such different ideas.
But it's interesting that you say it's about time, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I think that's one of the biggest
We're
things.
talking about time today. You know, fashion and time, and how our relationship with time is changing because of technology and what it does. And Burberry is driven by technology. Everything they do, they don't see it as something that supports the business or that provides a service. Technology is not about service. Technology is about, you know, how we breathe.
Yeah, but I think
you know,
ease has become luxury as well. Like, if you look at all Burberry, even if you look at Net-a-Porter, Matches, it's all about being able to get. It's about things being as easy for you as possible, you know, so like it will come to your door within an hour once you've ordered it, and all of that. I think that's become very, it's almost like the ability to be lazy is synonymous with luxury now, that you shouldn't have to lift a finger for this product to just kind of appear in front of you, which is weird because like a couple of weeks ago I went to Rome to interview the Valentino duo, and they were like, afterwards they were like, do you want to go around the atelier? And I was like, obviously yes. And they were saying, and not the duo themselves, some of the people who worked in the atelier, they were saying that they were finding it increasingly hard even to explain to people who were buying couture, who were like actively buying it, why they should do 3 fittings. And you know, they fly to people to do their fittings, and they were finding it really hard to explain why they couldn't have it instantly. And so that's what I mean with what's luxury. That shopper who obviously does engage with couture and wants to support that in a way, they see luxury as minimised inconvenience and speed. It's just super interesting. Yeah. You're nodding. What are you interested? You're just like...
Well, I think it is that concept of, you know, as we change, as you know, humanity develops, you know, as we begin to have perhaps a more complex relationship with ourselves, you know, going forward, because you know, many of us are lucky enough not to have to worry about the basics. You've only got to look over the other side of the world, you know, to see that. And this concept of being free and not having the restrictions and having, you know, being time rich seems to be emerging as a really massive motivation for everyone. So, you know, in some ways, you know, thinking about kind of an old school, a bespoke experience would involve a lot of engagement with the person who's fitting you, and that in itself would be seen to be a very high status, unusual kind of moment. That,
but then
you know,
I think that is technology, because if you look at how every app brands itself, it's like, we take care of this, so you have time to yourself. You know,
no, that's
like,
why I was nodding. Because I was just letting it wash over
interesting.
me. Really, I was just thinking.
But then, if that's become the norm of like, don't worry, you don't have to worry about this because you're too busy. We'll do it for you. It's very hard to make people then invest in anything,
it's because the norm of having a cleaner. I mean, how many people now have a cleaner? I remember when I was growing up, having a cleaner was just like the fanciest thing in the world. Now it seems that that's kind of quite common. Yeah. Having all these having doulas when you're pregnant, and having all these people.
What's a doula?
Well, you can Google it, but you know, basically having someone who will be with you throughout your pregnancy as a friend and as support
that's called a
to
friend?
talk you through. Exactly. Now you can pay for someone to do that, but it's someone who is trained.
So weird. I'd be like, get away
and she
from
will remain with you
don't have
after
your
the.
mum around. Or
Right, got you.
But there is this growing kind of, you know,
Yeah.
bourgeois need for paying for people to do things that traditionally
But
would
even
be
food, even when
Yeah.
you look at all the ready meals, and I can remember where you just went and bought vegetables in a bag with no plastic around it, and then you went to the butcher, and then you went to the baker, and then you went home and you cooked stuff.
Yeah.
That's
What?
how it used to happen in the old days, and now, but you know, It's so wild where you step in and there's all these different ready meals.
Yeah, well, it's like Deliveroo, it's all of this. There's like when you get the tube after this, there's a particular ad on the tube. I can't remember what it's for. It's some kind of service. They take care of something. It's like something quite personal. I don't know if it's like they come in and like clean your house or organise your stuff or something really weird. And it's like, you know, we'll take care of you so you can do, I think it's like, so you can do you, and then there's a girl like doing yoga, and then there's a man like lifting his son up and stuff. And it's so weird because it is that thing of like, you shouldn't have to lift a finger, which I guess goes back to that Burberry thing of like, you know, it's like there's nothing gets in your way if you want that item, you know, it's there for you.
We're at the ready meal of fashion.
Yes,
it's possible. We are.
Yeah.
It's fast food, yeah. But hopefully that will also encourage a very small niche group of people to really start engaging closer with all the artisanal and the craft and the stories.
Breakaway.
I think they really will, yeah, definitely, because there will be people. I think
vegans.
I think we often make the mistake as well of kind of branding all young people who love Instagram as all the same. But I think there will be
people. Oh my god, this really bothers me because I think young people have much more of a sense of like stepping up, doing things differently, you know, making their own choices. I actually think the problem is the generation I think it's the generation that remember getting the internet for the first time. It's like from, you know, 25 up to maybe 45 that have been responsible for this kind of like wanting everything. I think young people are much more like, we do things like this, we don't want that.
Well, I have so many conversations with my students who are frustrated at being around now, being young now, and that really is so disheartening.
Because they're branded in such a way.
Well, they hate it. You know, my youngsters, when I'm talking to them about not old things, but things that happened in the 90s, and a lot of them kind of say, oh God, you know, it's so boring now and everything's so available. But I genuinely see this kind of shift amongst the students that I meet for sure that are anti all of these things that we are often celebrating. I know a lot of them that just be like, oh no, you know, I kind of prefer that smaller model. I want to go to a grimy shop in the middle of Dalston and buy something that no one else has, and I don't want to share it online. And so there's all this, you know, and there are less and less people using.
Like the kids are into
but Generation Z, you know, I said it on the Paris kind of panel that we did the other day. Generation Z are not into Facebook, and they will be leaving Instagram because they're now having conversations with each other using, you know, they're just much more sophisticated in using digital technology. And I think their consumption of whatever luxury fashion might be, but definitely clothing, will be just as sophisticated, and I can't wait to see that unfold. But I think right now, yes, something has to change, and I think Burberry have quite rightly forced us and lots of other probably CEOs and companies to have really big conversations about what the point of what they do is.
I think that's a good note to end on, a note of change, and things are going to keep developing, which is, it's exciting. I feel like, it's good.
And the clothes were nice.
And the clothes were nice.
Well done, Team Burberry.
Should we give Christopher Bailey a round of applause for giving us all so much talk about?